What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today I want to talk to you about how you can continue to get better without getting burnt out, how you can continue to progress, how you can continue to move toward your goal, how you can continue to make yourself personally, continue to improve yourself, continue to grow your business, continue to pursue that weight loss that you're after, continue to exercise, continue to do all these things, anything that you're trying and striving to improve in your life that you have previously been burnt out on or are currently feeling burnt out on. That's what we're going to talk about, how you can start to overcome that feeling, how you can start to overcome that tendency to want to quit, that tendency to want to give into that, oh, I'm just not feeling motivated about this thing anymore. Because if you've started something, my assumption is it is important to you and that you want to actually continue to do it. So if we can buffer that, if we can figure that shit out, then you can start to check these things off of your list. You can start to check these things off and they become a part of your life instead of come and go. And eventually you just tell yourself you can't do anything that you want to do in life. So let's buffer that. Let's fix that shit so that you can become the kind of person that achieves the things that you want in life, no matter what that is. But before we get to that, if you've been watching or listening to any of these episodes and you think of a friend or you think of somebody that could use this same sort of talk or the same sort of strategies or tactics that we're going to talk about today, overcoming the tendency to want to continue to pursue higher peaks, which we'll talk about today, and learning how to take the brakes off instead, which we'll talk a lot about today. If you know somebody like that and you see them getting burnt out, make sure that you share this episode with them. The more you share, the more we reach. And I can not really tell you how grateful I am for you guys sharing these episodes. So make sure that you do that. But now I want to talk about what this looks like, what it looks like to start to get burnt out and how that happens. So all journeys have peaks and valleys, all of them, peaks and valleys, ups and downs. Peaks are, of course, when things are going well. Valleys are when things are not going so well. So if we can understand all journeys have peaks and valleys, then we can understand that there are generally, two things that we can focus on, or two areas that we can focus on to help us consistently get better and to progress forward. We can focus on increasing our peaks, or we can focusing on buffering our downside, or AKA increasing our valleys. What happens is, or what most people do, is they constantly want to increase that peak. They want to increase their peak output. They want to increase their overall effort. They want to increase whatever, which, to be totally honest, for a lot of people, sometimes it is a matter of increasing effort and increasing output. A lot of times that can be the case, for sure. But for people who have a drive to them naturally, a lot of times what happens is they go after that peak. They're constantly just like, okay, I was this good today, so tomorrow I'm going to be this good. I'm going to ramp it up, whatever that looks like, some significant amount. And eventually, one of two things happens. Number one, we end up getting burnt out. We end up crashing and burning. If you think about maybe a workout that you had and you felt really good, or maybe you were just getting started working out, and you go in and you're feeling good and you go and you bust your ass in the gym, and the next day you can't move. And then the day after that, you can't move. And then the day after that, you can't move. That is a example of, a high peak because you feel good or you're just getting started, and then a big trough. If you've ever had a project at work or you're in business and you've had a time where you feel like you can keep going, so you just keep going, but then the next day it's like, or sometime in the near future, your brain just crashed, you can't think straight. That is a trough. So you hit a peak, You pushed hard, you grinded it out, kid, and then you hit the trough. So that's what happens. We seek the peak, and then we hit the trough. The other thing that happens is, we end up countering our peaks with valleys anyway. We do it naturally because we convince ourselves, we start to negotiate with ourselves that we're doing a good job, or we start to negotiate with ourselves that we worked hard before. So we worked hard yesterday, so we can pat ourselves on our back today with a reward by not working hard. Well, I went to the gym yesterday, and I'm supposed to go today, but I worked hard yesterday, so I can take today off. I ate good yesterday, or I ate good at my last meal, or whatever, and so I can go ahead and have this snack, or I can go ahead and go out with my friends. I did extra at work yesterday, so I can take it easy today. So we start to we play this mental balance game where we convince ourselves that since we did more than we were supposed to do, now we can take it easy, in which case, again, we end up at a baseline, at an average that we're not seeing. We're only paying attention to the hard work that we're putting in, and we're not paying attention to the neglect and the negotiation that's going on behind all that hard work. And then we get frustrated that we're not making more progress because we're like, look at all this fucking hard work I'm doing. But you're completely missing this other part that's happening. So we want to be able to counter these two things. Now, again, it's worth remembering that maybe you just need to work harder. Maybe you just need to do more. I can tell you, having owned a fitness studio for 10 years and trained people for 15 years, I can tell you that most people's problem in the gym is that they just need to work harder. They either need to get in the gym more, or they need to work harder in the gym. Most people just don't work that hard in the gym. So now, with that being said, being in the gym is better than not. Most definitely, so I'm not taking that away from anybody. But when it comes down to it, if you feel yourself not getting results, that's the case. That's what's happening. So definitely there is that. And yet, people still get burnt out on things. Whenever you get started on something, you're excited and you seek the peak. And so you get burnt out. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to keep going. We don't want to burn. So why does this happen? Why do we have the tendency to pursue the peak and ignore the valley? There's two reasons why this happens. But before we get to that, I'm going to get a drink. Sorry that I, continue to cough. I am currently taking a niacin supplement. Niacin helps increase nitric oxide in the body. And if you've ever done this before, when you have higher nitric oxide levels, it kind of like, creates this, feeling in your throat that is just makes you want to cough. So if it seems like I'm coughing a lot, that's what's going on. I'll try not to cough directly in the microphone, but no promises. Okay. So why are we constantly pursuing the peak versus recognizing the valley and how we can buffer the valley instead? Two reasons. Number one is what I'll call the straight line delusion. Number two is dopamine. Okay, so one of them is physiological in nature, and one of them is mental in nature. So first, with straight line delusion. Most people, I think intuitively, we understand that progress is not a straight line. If I sat down and talked to you about a goal and I talked through what that looks like, you would tell me that obstacles happen. You would tell me that there are going to be peaks and valleys. You may not say it in the same way, but you would tell me that. And yet, I am certain if you are a human being listening to this, that you have started something and you've quit something because it wasn't a straight line, because it didn't go from A to Z in a straight, in a straight trajectory like you had hoped that it would. Even though you know deep down inside that that is not what's going to happen. So we think that if we work faster, then we can get to the other end of our line faster. If I focus on doing more of this thing, if I go harder, if I push more, then I will get to that point faster. But at no point in human history has that happened. You have failed at things because you have done this and you have stopped. And maybe you've done it a couple of times. I know I have. I am a human being. And so I have done this a couple of times where I start something, I push hard. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I decided it was time to start getting strong again, start putting weight on again. I got down to like 175 pounds. I did not like the way that I look, did not like the way that I felt, did not like any of it. I wanted to have more muscle on me. I wanted to look bigger. I wanted to be bigger, and I wanted to be stronger. So I put the pedal down, jumped in the gym. I mean, I was already in the gym very regularly, but I was training much different. Changed my training, change it to more compound movements, more heavy movements, and did it quickly. Like shifted it and then started lifting heavy. Didn't allow my body to adapt. This is all coming from a person, by the way, who has been coaching people for 15 years. This is how irrational human beings are. Remember, the goal is to not fool yourself, and you are the easiest one to fool. It doesn't matter who the fuck you are and how smart you think you are. I'm telling you, me, a person who trains people and tells them, you need to slow down sometimes. You need to progress. You need to let your body adapt. You need to make sure you don't overtrain. You need to make sure you do blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you, I did this. So I started training heavy quickly, and my body got super pissed, and so I did that for probably 9 months or so, and that was maybe 15 months ago that I finally talked myself off a cliff and decided to do something rational. And I am finally getting to the point where my body is able to progress without pain because I had built so much compensation in my body trying to lift too heavy too fast that I crashed and burned. And 15 months later, I'm finally getting to the point where I can do things without that level of pain. Now, when I first started lifting heavy, if I would have initially slowed myself down, let myself adapt, adjusted accordingly, took my time, made it sequential, progressive changes over time, it wouldn't have been a 2-year journey to get to this point where now I'm basically starting to make progress again. It wouldn't have happened. I can be pissed about that, or I can be rational about it and go, okay, next time I know, I need to learn that this is what I need to do. And sometimes we do that in certain parts of our lives, but we do a terrible job in areas where we feel like we need to make progress quick. For so many people, it's health and fitness, and business and finance are other areas where we feel like we need to do this quickly. And then we make stupid decisions, and then we crash and burn. So starting with the assumption that there is a straight line from A to Z puts us in a compromised mindset that does not allow us to make rational decisions. So that's number one. And that, again, leads to burnout and leads to these other compensation things that we're doing. Number two is dopamine. Okay, physiological thing inside of us that we have no control over other than how we direct it. Okay, so dopamine has been or is known as the molecule of more and the molecule of pursuit. So it pushes you to pursue things, and it pushes you to pursue more of the things that feel good. Social media is a perfect example of this. Social media is just one big dopamine pool, essentially. That's all that it is. That's all that it is. Not all of it. X, I would argue, has a very high level of good quality information, but outside of that, Instagram and Facebook are basically just a big and TikTok especially, just one big dopamine pool is what it is. So all that those algorithms are set up to do is to get you to want to continue to pursue scrolling and to want more of it. That's all that they're set up to do. And that's what they do. Next time you pick up your phone and start scrolling, pay attention to what happens. You black out and you wake up 30 minutes later and you're still scrolling. Why? Because the algorithm has fooled you. Remember, the goal is to not fool yourself, and you're the easiest one to fool. So, excuse me. So, with dopamine as our pursuit of more, what happens in this instance, where we're constantly going after peaks, is it feels good to go after peaks. It feels good to go after records. It feels good to go after highs. It feels good to start things. So there's a bunch in there that we can unpack. As we're moving along, it feels much better to feel like we worked harder than we did yesterday or the day before or last week, which is great, but not great if it leads to a crash. Because if it leads to a crash, that means there is a significant dip until you return back to baseline, however long that may take. So that pursuit of that peak feels good. You get dopamine hits by pursuing it and then by doing it. I go in, I work harder than I did, it feels good, I get a dopamine hit, and you get addicted to it and it feels better. But then dopamine gets pissed off and you crash. For every dopamine peak, there is a subsequent crash. The higher the peak, the further the fall, and then the longer it takes to get back to that baseline level. Another part of this is starting things. When we start things, it feels good. And this is a very unconscious, requires a more in-depth conversation than what we're about to have. But a big reason why, not the only reason why, but a big reason why people start and then quit things and then start them again is because it feels good to start things. So we start something and it feels good. And then we get bored and then we quit because that dopamine drops away. And then we start it again because it feels good. So we become a person that starts, but we are not the person that finishes or that continues. Because that dopamine hit that you get from when you start something feels nice and you get addicted to it. And so starting things feels good. So I'm starting things, which is great because you got to start before you get somewhere, but you got to keep going to get somewhere. So with those two things in mind, we can start to understand how this dopamine fools us into feeling unmotivated or feeling like we don't have willpower or feeling like we are distracted and procrastination and all of these other things that pop up and creep up and keep us from making progress. A big part of that may just be that dopamine is crashing and that you're convincing yourself that you have these other things going on. So we want to be able to overcome those two things. Overcome that straight line bias where we think we're getting from point A to point B in a straight line, and our tendency for our dopamine to take control of us and want to continue to pursue those peaks. And then when we crash, we just convince ourselves that we can't do it. We convince ourselves that we can't keep up, or we can't keep going, or it's not for us, or I'm not motivated, whatever it is. And we don't recognize that we just fucking drilled ourselves into the ground. So how do we start to do that? Well, excuse me. Two things. Number one is we want to move from outcome focused to process focused. Number two, we want to shift our dopamine habit from instant gratification to delayed gratification. Okay, so let's talk about those two so that we can understand what to do so that we can make this work. Number one, move from outcome focus to process focus. Understand that any outcome that you are pursuing is arbitrary. Completely. The outcome and the deadline or the date that you set for it is arbitrary. Completely. You've just decided this is how much weight I want to lose, and this is the date in which I want to do it. This is how much I want to increase sales, and this is the date in which I want to do it. Arbitrary. Completely. Not useless, by the way. Not useless, which we'll talk about, but arbitrary. So if we can understand that those outcome goals that we have are arbitrary, then we can start to detach ourselves from the doing or not doing of them, the completing or not completing of them. Okay, what outcome goals are good for is measurement. It is progress. It is seeing how well things are working. It is seeing how well the actions that you're taking on a daily basis are moving you toward that, the outcome. That's what it's useful for. It is not achieving the outcome in and of itself that makes the thing work. It is the actions that you take that make the thing work. So when we shift our mindset or focus from outcome focus to process focus, then we are focusing on the process. What is getting us? What are the things that we're doing? What is the process, we're implementing that is moving me toward that outcome? What is it? Okay. Generally speaking, it's going to be a somewhat regular, somewhat mundane, somewhat boring process. A regular set of activities mixed in with some arbitrary set of activities that are moving you forward. Health and fitness, for instance, a process for getting in shape and getting in the weight room could be weightlifting on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning before I go to work. That is my process. And then I go for a walk on the other days, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I go for a walk at the same time. That is my process. So I'm doing it every day. I'm hitting that point every day at the same time every day to make sure I'm building it into my life. That is the process that I do. That is what moves me toward my goal. And then you can see how well it's doing. After 6 weeks, you can measure how well have I moved toward my goal? How much progress have I made? How close am I to this outcome? And then you can adjust accordingly. Okay, I've done well, but it seems to be slowing down. So now maybe I'll adjust to weightlifting on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'm weightlifting 4 days a week, and then I'm walking on the other days. Now I've picked up my intensity. I'm doing more weight training, and I can measure again down the road to see how much progress I'm making. And you can do that same exact thing for anything. Investing money. I'm going to invest this amount of money. It's called dollar cost averaging. I invest a regular set of money at a regular interval, no matter what. Doesn't matter if the stock market's high, if the stock market's low, where gold is, where Bitcoin is, where whatever it is that you're investing in. I'm going to invest this amount of money at whatever interval, every week, every month. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's my process. Business is the same thing. Any goal that you have is the same thing. Now, again, you will have, of course, plenty of goals that require you to have different actions. Maybe they're not the same actions over and over again, but for most goals, most things that you're pursuing, there's a set of processes, like basic actions that you will repeat over and over again. Okay, so we're shifting our focus from outcome to process. We use the outcome as a measurement just to see where we are, but the process is the thing that we are focused on doing to move us toward that outcome. Now, Jerry, that's super boring. Like, why the fuck would I want to be doing that all the time? But like, just the same thing over and over again is what you're telling me? There got to be some secret. Don't you have something up your sleeve that I can do that is much more fun than that? I mean, it's got to be fun, doesn't it? Or, I mean, you got to have some tips or tricks or something like that hidden up your sleeve to help me be able to do this better. No, no, it is simply not the case. You do things regularly. The problem is our dopamine gets bored, so we need to adjust our dopamine. Again, a much more in-depth conversation than what we're about to have, but the number one problem is you have trained yourself as a dopamine addict, essentially. And until you untrain yourself to be a dopamine addict, then things will be boring to you. And this is all around life in general. And 90% of it has to do with your phone. Okay? Every time you pick up your phone because of a ding, because of a buzz, because of a whiz, because of a wing, or because you're scrolling, or whatever happens, like that thing is a dopamine, like absolute ticking time bomb that is making you an idiot. So, without going too in depth and freaking you the fuck out, figuring out how to undopamine yourself from that phone or disconnect yourself so that you can shift your dopamine focus to delayed gratification, to long term, is what we want, which you can. You can increase your baseline dopamine levels so that they are more consistently higher and focused on the daily tasks that I'm completing instead of instant gratification and trying to get something quickly. Okay? Just a couple of quick tips. I don't want to go too in depth. Like I said, this is another conversation for another day. But a couple of things. Turn off your fucking notifications. You don't need them. You can check your phone regularly. Set a timer every 30 minutes. Check your phone. Got it? Start there. What else? On your scrolling addiction you have, set times of the day that you will scroll. I will scroll at this time and this time. And then set a timer for how long you're going to do it. That's it. Okay? Just start with those things and then, go from there. But until you understand that how you interact with, because, and I go back to the phone because it is such a big part of everybody's life, how you interact with that thing is how you interact with the world and how you go about your life. So if you're having trouble focusing, it's not because you're getting old. It's not because the world's fucked up. It's not because of any of that. It's because of how you deal with your phone. If you're having trouble remembering things, it's because of how you deal with your phone. It's because you look up everything on your fucking phone. If you're having trouble continuing to move forward and put off gratification, is because of how you deal with your phone. So until you change that, there's a good chance that the rest of this won't matter much. It will help, but it won't matter. Okay, stepping off of my soapbox and moving forward. So we want to shift our dopamine, from instant gratification to delayed gratification. How do we do that? Number one is the phone thing. Number two is shifting our focus from outcome to process, because our dopamine wants us to get to that outcome. If we do, it feels good. That's why we want to pursue that thing. But that's not what's going to get us there. The things that we do, the actions that we take, will move us toward that. So we mentally shift our focus. And as we do that, every day we need to set our, retrain our dopamine to focus on what we've done good and how we're doing today. So how does that happen? There's two things that you can do. Number one is when you write down the things that you're going to do today, which if you don't do that, I encourage you to do that. When you write down the things that you do today, that you're going to do today, and as you get them done, when you get them done, scratch the thing off or check the thing off and do it with emotion and do it with some level of something going through your head that is reminding you that you are the type of person that does things. I'm the type of person that completes things. I'm the type of person that puts off instant gratification. I'm the type of person that finishes what I start. And as you scratch those things off, you're kind of forcing yourself a little bit of emotion and a little bit of that dopamine, so that you're shifting that dopamine and that emotion toward being the person that completes things, does things that they say they're going to do, and checks things off their list. At the end of your day, there's 3 questions you should ask yourself. I call this the 1% process, so that, excuse me, that was like right in the microphone, so that you are constantly improving and getting better. Number 1, what went well today? Number 2, what needs work? Number 3, how do I get 1% better tomorrow? Okay, what went well, what needs work, and how do I get 1% better tomorrow? So at the end of your day, you're answering those questions. They can be as in-depth as you want them to be, but just take some time to think about those things. What things went well today? What things need work? Everybody needs work. No judgment. What needs work? And then, how do I put that into practice? How can I get 1% better tomorrow? What can I put into practice so that I can get 1% better tomorrow? And simply doing that will help shift your frame, shift your focus, shift your emotions toward getting better at a daily pace, focusing on those daily actions, focusing on that daily process, instead of wanting that dopamine hit, instead of constantly pursuing that high. Okay? Because here's the thing. If you can become the kind of person who does the things that you say you're going to do, instead of negotiating with yourself after you've had a hard day or after you've worked hard yesterday or whatever, and no matter what, this is what I said I'm going to do. So if I feel real good, this is all I'm doing today. If I feel like shit, this is what I have to finish today. It's the same amount of work potentially, but on a good day, it's easy to do, and then it's easy to want to keep going. On a bad day, it's fucking hard to do. So you just have to finish it. And if you just do that much, then your baseline raises. Everything goes up. Rising tide raises all boats. So if we do that, then we improve. We're not worried or focused only on the peak, only on the high, only on ultimate, records. Everything goes up. Our highs will get higher and our lows will get higher, more importantly, so that we don't have to crash and burn as far, and we don't have to then take time to return to baseline, and then we can get going again. That's what we want. That's what we're pursuing. Okay? Remember, take some time to review this and think about this. This is a insanely important topic, an insanely important idea, and one that can definitely have a huge impact on your life if you process it and think it through. Remember, if you have anybody who is going through a similar struggle, being burnt out, feeling like they're lost, unmotivated, whatever it is, share this episode with them. But I appreciate you guys listening to me babble. I appreciate you, as always, for being here and paying attention. And I'll catch you guys next time.